something about cancer, we all think, it's a deadly disease, so that death is something that's at least it used to be synonymous for a lot of people back in days, cancer. But now things change, now we are in a booming era of a great cancer research happening around in our lives. And I mean, what do you say, I was trying, graduated 2 years ago. I was trying for 6 years, and now I'm practicing for 2 years. In the 80 years, every month there was a new drug or something that's coming in. So that's how much, the field is evolving, and there is a lot of, positive enthusiasm, a lot of, what do you say, opportunities out there, happening in the cancer care. And that's the reason I want to talk here today, saying, what are some of those changes, at least to explain in an easy way, and how people can reach out to us to get this cancer care in future. So as you see, well, if you see, cancer is one of the one of the common reasons, the common causes of the death, in the United States. And if you look in Pennsylvania, there are around 80,000 new cases that are diagnosed each year. And most commonly, the common cases are breast cancer, lung cancer, colorectal, and prostate cancer. So although we have these many cases, and with all the research I just mentioned, saying that there's a lot of drugs coming in, so you have the patients with cancer, and you have the drugs that are coming to help the patients. But there should be a bridge, right? I mean, people who are educated, yes, they can reach out, they can talk to their relatives, or they can talk to the family members, and they can get the care. But how about people who are in the rural areas, people who are in societies where they cannot get enough health education, so these are the people that should be, there are some barriers in there. So we do think these are, to be honest with you, geography, we don't think it matters, but that's, to be honest with you, it's making a lot of difference, and a lot of times for people not to achieve the care. So when I told you initially, in the past, when people used to talk about cancer, the first thing that comes out of the mind is chemotherapy, right? So everyone with cancer, people used to think it's the chemotherapy or the radiation. That's all everyone knows. But cancer care definitely advanced a lot. This is what I tell my patients in the past. When they come for a new chemotherapy, this is what I'll tell them. So hey, you have a bug, if you see a bug in a table or something like that, how in the past, we just kill that, so you have to use your hand to kill the bug. But right now, the cancer has changed significantly. We have something called precision medicine, where you don't have to kill the bug with the entire hand like that. You can just point there exactly in that area, so that one, you're killing exactly where the cancer is. Number two, you're not hurting the other organs, so that means you're having less side effects. So that's something that means and with precision, you're getting the best outcomes you can get. With precision, just focusing on the same area where the cancer is, you're having less side effects. So that can bust a lot of what do you say, anxiety of the patients who are coming for a cancer care. So I put some names in there, but what do you say? I'll give you an example. Stage 4 lung cancer. Back then, it's all chemotherapy. Right now, you can just treat with the pill. Where people can live for many, many years. Not just that. So there are a lot of other areas where you can just start with. You can take pills. You don't need to be coming to the infusion rooms around the clock. You don't need to be in there for hours and hours. You can just have your cancer cured, treated with pills alone. So that's how the precision medicine has changed recently. So, and next thing is immunotherapy. So immunotherapy is something which is at least here for the last 15, 20 years. A lot of people still don't have education about that. So how I commonly or easily explain it to my patients is, imagine cancer cell is it's a bad cell in your body, right? So it's going under the radar, saying it has its own cape where it has its own cape and escapes your body's immune system to, like, ideally the immune system should go and attack the cancer cell. But what happens is, like, this cancer cell has this cape around it, and whenever this immune cell comes close to the cancer cell, it will tell the immune system, hey, I'm your brother, don't kill me, don't kill me. So it will, like, say that. So what immunotherapy does is, like, it's gonna go knock that signal where the cancer cell is telling your immune system, like, not to attack that. And so when you close that, like, signal, next time immune system goes there, like, what it's going to do is, like, the cancer cell still try to say, hey, I'm your brother, don't kill me. But, like, this time, you're not, the immune system is so smart, and with immunotherapy, you are able to uncape that, and, like, eventually immune system will go and kill the cancer cells. And it has, that means it's just activating your own body's immune system to kill the cancer. So, like, so these are like all the newer treatments we are having, like, which is like, and for with immunotherapy, like, the side effects are so low. I mean, you can have side effects, but, like, it's not common. But to be honest with you, as you get older, you will have less side effects with immunotherapy, because it's using your immune system, and, like, as you get older, your immune system will be slightly weak, and it won't be crazy enough to cause the symptoms. I mean, right now I have a 99-year-old male patient who is getting immunotherapy for a melanoma, and he comes every 3 weeks. Like, we just celebrated his 99th birthday in our clinic. So, like, so that's how the immunotherapy is, like, I mean, it has side effects, but very tolerable. So definitely there is a lot of scope, or, like, there is a lot of advancement, there is a lot of enthusiasm in the, like, in the cancer care. So, and not just the treatment, right? Like, I mean, if you can diagnose, first of all, if you can prevent a cancer, half job is done there. Like, if you can detect early, like, half job is done there. So, like, so that's the reason, like, there is a lot of focus, there's a lot of, like, education should be done, like, in screening the cancers, like, and also preventing the cancers. Like, some of the examples are for HPV vaccine, like, in females, like, where, what do you say, cervical cancer is one of the most common cancers in females. Like, with the HPV vaccine out there, you can prevent a lot of cancers, right? Like, in female and such, like, so, I mean, I didn't know, like, I was trained in India back then, like, I had some education, but until I came in here, I didn't have an idea, or, like, how these vaccines are acting and all those things. So, I mean, yeah, if I'm in the medical field, like, in the beginning of the career, if I didn't know, like, these exist, like, it's hard for people who are in, like, a little far from the community to know about these things. So we collectively should, like, educate people about cancer screening, like, following with the primary care regularly, at least, like Dr. Joshi's, like, they have foundation where you can have the camps where, like, to educate people about screening, and also, like, age appropriate, making referrals for them appropriately, some of those things. Yeah. And so how do we advance the field, right? So, like, in advancing the field, what do you say, clinical trials. Like, so one of my main topic for today is, like, cancer research. So why is research important? Like, one, to advance the field. Number two, to give the best, like, treatment for the patient. So when a patient come to our clinic, what we say is the first line of treatment is clinical trial. Like, it's not, like, because clinical trials, like, one, it will give you an opportunity to the most advanced treatment that's available. And, like, here at Penn State, like, we are at forefront, like, so there is at least 150 plus clinical trials running at various specialties, like, in various cancers, like, not just cancer, like, also different specialties in endocrinology, like, in cardiology, like, there's a lot of clinical trials happening. The biggest thing is, let's say there is I don't know whether this is a myth or not, like, people crossing the bridge in this area is a big thing. Yeah. So, right, you don't have to, go through that again. So we, like, a Penn State, like, although we have a main campus at Hershey, we do have campuses locally. We have two, like, one in Harrisburg, like, on Union Deposit Road, like, we just built a new cancer center at Penn State Cancer at Hamden Medical Center. So, you don't have to go there. Cancer care came to you. So like, so they're like, we actively can enroll patients here in the community for clinical trials. Obviously, we educate our patients who come to our clinic about these clinical trials. So again, like this partnership with our Highmark, or like, with our World Affairs of Council here, like, these are the opportunities that we would appreciate as a group, because like, when we see patients in clinic, we're able to educate them, like one person at a time. Like, this is a broader like platform for us, like to reach out to multiple people, to explain like what we could do. And so that with community outreach, like if someone has myths about like, hey, cancer is deadly, cancer is only chemotherapy, that at least like even one person out of this room can change, can learn something out of it, like, and can educate like a couple more people, that changes the things, like, so that's work in progress. So yeah, so overall the future of cancer is here, like, everyone is working hard like to improve the cancer care. Like I think the plate is full, like we just need to have a person next to you to eat it, like, so like a plate. So that's what I feel like. So it's not no longer distance promise. So we are here. We are here to help. We are here to educate. We will take our time for anyone who come to us, like, to educate about this. So please go for cancer screening, age-appropriate screening. Like, your doctors, like, if they're recommending something, they're recommending out of a lot of like, hard work or research behind that. So please reach out to CARE, take help. What do you say? We will travel together as a group, like, in order to help a patient with the cancer. So again, I want to reinforce that, like, we opened our Penn State Health Hamden Medical Center, like our brand new cancer institute there, where in the previously we used to have medical doctors at one place, radiation doctors at different place. Like with the new institute here, we have our chemotherapy, like medical oncologist, radiation oncologist, or breast center, like, and everything under the same umbrella, which would be more convenient with state-of-art technology and facilities for all the patients. So that's what I want to tell. Like, again, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of opportunity. So please take care. Take the help. Yeah. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Well, we will follow up with some questions in the Q&A, but I can tell you, with all the bad news we have surrounding us right now, hearing your good news, it's exhilarating. It truly is needed to hear that cancer is no longer, I heard clear, a death sentence. It doesn't even have to be this horrible chemotherapy and all that we're hearing. And what's even more important is screening, catching it early and working with your doctor. So there's more to talk about with that. So we will come back. Dr. Joshi, it's your turn, and I know you have a lot of important information to share as well.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you very much for having me. What I'm going to share in the next few minutes is something that has been extraordinarily close to our hearts, and certainly no pun intended there, is that the last 2 to 3 years have probably been the most exciting time in my own personal life, and in some ways both Renu and my life together. And what we would like to do is to set the stage by first presenting a short two-minute trailer of the film that we completed about 6 months ago, that's out and being screened as we speak in a large Indian TV platform. And in the United States and everywhere outside of India, it is being it's openly available on YouTube. More about that after the short trailer. So if we can have that, please.
In the middle of a beautiful hike at 8,000 feet above the sea level in Uttarakhand, I had chest pain. For a minute, I thought I may not make it. Zindagi mein pehli baar guzarne ka dar laga.
For many of us from the Indian subcontinent, time may be running out fast. A human enemy, the heart attack.
Heart attack. Heart attack. There is a rise in heart attacks among young people.
This is an epidemic.
Yeah, we're talking about people of South Asian descent.
Our real journey took us to 3 different continents, specifically to India, United Kingdom, and the United States.
70% of deaths from heart attacks occurred in people between ages 30 and 60.
2.5 लाख लोग हर साल ST elevation MI से हिंदुस्तान में मर रहे हैं।
So both of us set out to uncover what is behind the staggering loss of life.
उस टाइम इतना पेन हुआ था कि ना तो कुछ बोल पा रहा था मैं।
The common thread is just how frequent heart attacks are. We spoke to some of the best heart experts in the world.
When they talk, people listen.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, मोटापा जैसे हमारे modern आभूषण बन गए।
Heart disease and its risk as a whole in women seems to be very, very under-recognized.
Why is it happening?
Is it our genes?
You know you shouldn't be smoking.
80% diet, 20% everything else.
Some have placed stress at the top of the list of the causes of heart attack.
Habits are created by a loop, right? Cue, craving, action, and reward.
So I have lost between 14 to 15 pounds. Life is beautiful. Let's take care of ourselves better.
तो सवाल ये है कि क्या ये हमारी किस्मत है? और अगर किस्मत है, तो क्या हम किस्मत बदल सकते हैं?
So what you saw was a project that we called the Brown Heart that started about 3 years ago. In fact, we were right here in the Highmark building at the lower level in the cafeteria with about 100 plus people from the Indian subcontinent, talking to them about early and severe heart disease among South Asians, those from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. And one thing led to the other, and it became obvious to us that there was a lot of education to be done. Heart disease and heart attacks remains the #1 cause of death, any community, South Asian or not, across the world. While we talk about cancer is obviously the big scare, and it's remarkable to see the number of advances in cancer management. But when we look at it just purely from a scale perspective, right? If you think about it, if you just take women, for example, heart disease is the #1 cause of death in women, almost 10 times more than breast cancer, right? So across the world, heart disease is a significant mortality-producing disease. And in South Asian communities, it's about 3 times more common than in other communities in this country. Pakistanis have it 4 times as much. And it occurs about 10 years earlier in us than other communities. So it was a big, big problem. And we got into what we felt was the best way to get around educating. And this was the fun part of this process. Most of my life, I've been interested in doing creative work, writing creative short films, doing creative stories, fiction writing, nonfiction writing, and so on. And what I thought was, instead of, we as doctors think in a very clinical way. We think of educating people in a certain way, right? But we are not inherently good educators when it comes to public speaking and being able to talk to people in a language that they can understand, right? Because most of our time, we either stay in a research lab or we are talking to people one-on-one. But we're not talking to people as communities, as groups, as people. We are talking to folks when they're patients. We're typically not talking to people, as human beings. What's happening in their lives, what's happening in their communities, and so on. So this struck me for the first time when we are used to writing journal articles, for example. And this struck me for the first time about close to 10 years ago when I wrote an article in the New York Times, which generated so much attention that I was blown away by the fact that the tens of thousands of people who were able to get the message with that 800-word article that I have subsequently written numerous ones for Penn Live since then, is I felt that there is a certain power to be able to talk directly to people and communities in a language that they can understand, plain, straight English language, right? Or the local language, depending on who you're talking to. And I felt it was important to be able to put together something where right around the same time, 2 years ago, we were beginning to lose several people in our community from heart disease. Many of them very, very young, 40 to 45 years old. In one instance, a 38-year-old who dropped dead, right? Numerous people in their late 30s, early 40s in the Indian community dropping dead from heart attacks. Two of our close friends got open hearts in their 50s. Out of the blue, suddenly chest pain, subsequently got open hearts. Right around that time, we were traveling to India. Renu and I were traveling. We love to hike. We are both avid hikers. And we are both, in some ways, health freaks. We take good care of ourselves. We regularly exercise. We give talks on nutrition, education, and all of that. And on one of those trips, at about 8,000 feet above sea level, like Renu said in the introduction to the documentary, Renu developed chest pain in India. And we were just the two of us in the middle of nowhere, no access to healthcare, nothing at that point. And the closest hospital would have been about 3 hours away. It was scary as heck. To make a long story short, one thing led to the other, and Renu was diagnosed with heart disease, which is public information at this point, but never had an actual heart attack. That gave us the opportunity to kind of get into this world of prevention, to be able to say, hey, what can we do? What can we do to learn more about heart disease? And that led us, for the next year, we were able to travel across the globe, across the United States, across the United Kingdom, and across India over a period of 6 to 8 months, collected testimonies and good quality evidence, and created this film called The Brown Heart. And it was all based on philanthropic dollars donated right here in central Pennsylvania. Every penny was donated here. In fact, within a span of about 8 days, we had the entire budget of the film covered, upward of about $100,000. So we were able to create this film. And then once the film was out, the last 6 months has been an absolute joy. I can't tell you how much fun it has been to be able to not only put it out, but because there were no strings attached, there was no intent of a return on investment, if you will. The return on investment was saved lives, right? So our intent was, the more eyeballs we can get in front of this film, so if you had a denominator, instead of talking to, say, 30 people today or 150 people like we had whenever we did, we do regularly 100 people, 150 people. So the denominator at any given time, let's say, is an average of about 100 people. So we said, what if and out of those 100 people, probably 10 decide to change and 5 actually change, right? So we said, what if we increase the denominator to millions, create a film, and a high quality film? So I'm delighted to say that the last set of statistics that we got from the television station in India, 500,000 views have occurred. So the denominator in India itself is about 500,000. In about 1 week, in about 1 week's time from now, we will have the rights back to be able to have the film across the world, including India, totally free on YouTube, right? So that will be yet another opportunity to have the denominator go from 500,000 to maybe 1 million. So the thought is, if 10% decide to change and 5% actually change, you can do the math, how many saved lives we are talking about, right? So that's been the joy, and Renu and I have had the time of our lives traveling and essentially raising awareness about the film. It's a 2-hour documentary film that has human stories, that has evidence, that has doctors, and so on and so forth. And in the next couple minutes, I'll share with you some of the learnings other than the concept of education that I just put out there, right? Here's what the learning was, and what am I doing? Okay, let's see. Okay, so here's the learning, and this learning applies to everyone. This doesn't apply to South Asians, right? Because heart disease is not restricted to South Asians. We just needed to raise awareness, perhaps disproportionately more in South Asians because of all that I said. The disease is severe, more people are dropping dead, and so on, but it remains the #1 cause of death across the board. So the learnings were, #1, which applies to every single human being on the planet, right? That in some way, shape, or form, we start our lives with our genetic predisposition to cardiac disease or not, right? And that risk is on a spectrum. It's not like you are 100% and I'm 0. Each one of us on the planet has a certain genetic what's called a polygenic risk score. So you may be 80% prone, I may be 30% prone, Joyce may be 10% prone, and so on and so forth. So you start with a genetic predisposition, and the typical analogy is genetics sort of loads the gun, right? But environment pulls the trigger. So what you see on the slide there is an 80-20 principle, which is 80% of this. And the same thing applies to every other chronic disease, maybe with an exception of cancer. So diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, same concepts. 80% of it is environment and preventable, right? And throughout the film, what we learned was what those environmental things are and how you can change them. And if you were to forget all of that and you wanted me to give you a distilled down version in 30 seconds, right? It would be the following. It's diet and exercise, stupid. No, sorry, not stupid. Take that word away from back in the day. But diet, exercise, stress, in addition to a bunch of other things, 90% of which, almost 100% of it is preventable, right? In theory. So how do we do it? That was the other part of the film, which was perhaps the most exciting, and that's where our daughter and us collaborated together. She's a psychologist, on habit change and habit change science. So everyone tells you to exercise, right? Everyone tells you to lose weight. Everyone tells you to eat healthy. But are we able to do it? Not really. We know smoking is bad for us, but if everyone who knew smoking was bad for you, we just told them smoking is bad for you and they stopped, well, the world would be a different place, right? As far as mortality. Doesn't happen. So what we did was, the last half an hour of the film, which is the absolute most fun part of the film, is how do we change human behavior? And take home messages on how human behavior is changed and tangible tips on what you can do tomorrow morning. So for example, I give an example in the film myself from my learning after having failed and failed and failed at exercise, looking at habit loops, cue, craving, action, and reward. One thing I did was I began to put my exercise stuff, my gear, my shoes, my Nike, all of that at my bedside. So the first thing that I would see would be that, and I can't kind of jump over it, right? Unless I really jumped over it, which I did a few times, because it's human nature, right? But those were examples, and we have about 30 of such examples to say, here's what you do tomorrow morning to change, right? And the second big, so the big take-home message there was, it's our brain and our mind, and if we train it and make it dummy-proof, we can make this stuff happen, right? And the second take-home message was that you've got to know yourself. The same concept that Ashok was talking about, early prevention, early screening. In the heart disease context, half the battle is won if you know yourself. And we talk about 5 or 6 very important things that you need to know about yourself. One of the big things being your weight and your waist circumference, your cholesterol panel, your LP(a) and a CAC score. So without going into the content, but the theory was know yourself. Once you know yourself, you can do something about it. If you don't, it's like having no map and you're out at sea, right? So those were some take-home messages, and I will obviously take questions later on, but I'm going to leave you with a couple of kind of take-home messages that I was, that I've taken home from this. One is a very philosophic one, right? Which is all of us throughout our lives think of something that gives us true joy and happiness from the inside, right? But most of the time life comes in the way. We aren't able to do it, or we kind of half-ass do it, right? So if I had a choice to do this again, I would have started this journey. I may have decided to retire maybe 10 years earlier, right? So instead of at 60 when I decided to start the foundation, I may have started at 50, beginning to take care of people who need our help, who are vulnerable. That's the most joyous part of my life. When I was heading Pinnacle Health System as Chief Medical Officer, it didn't give me the kind of joy that it gives me today at the bottom, taking care of people who have nowhere else to go. 70% of the time, they can't even speak the language that I speak, English, right? That's the joy. They're about as vulnerable as they can be. To take care of them has been the most joyous thing in my life. The second thing is any hobby that we enjoy, to be able to pursue it at a time while we're still healthy. Because at 80 and 85 and 90, I hope all of us are healthy, and that's part of the job of the film, is to keep you that way. But if statistics were to be done today, odds are that we may not be as healthy, right? So while we are healthy at 50, 45, 35, 55, we need to do things that we enjoy from the heart. And thankfully, I interact with a lot of people, including Joyce, who do exactly that and have been doing that for a long time, right? So those were kind of my two learnings, and I hope you were able to glean something out of that as well. We'll take more during the question and answer session. Thank you so much for your time.
That's great. And I will tell you, I urge you, we saw the trailer, but you really need to take the time to see The Brown Heart. I went out of thinking, these are friends, I want to go and support them, and I won't learn anything, but I can't tell you, I learned so much. First of all, in understanding the little, the plaque buildups and all of that stuff. I mean, I learned so much that I'm a big fan. I say you have to see this. It makes it simple and easy and understandable. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, about all the things that he shared with that. But I want to bring Dr. Renew up, because to see this beautiful woman in the film there and saying she was feeling chest, I mean, that got everybody's attention. She's not overweight. You're right. She looks but she was impacted by this. So it caught our attention because it can happen to anyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Joyce, for that introduction. So one thing I would say, which Nirma did not say, if you forget the first 30 minutes of the film, which talks about South Asian, the rest of the film is for everyone. Yeah. So it's not like I won't do it because this is for South Asian. It is for everyone. All the principles that are important for everyone. But one of the things we talk about in the film is one of the biggest risk factor for heart attack is diabetes. And being an endocrinologist and a diabetes specialist, it has been very close to my heart all my life. And this is what I thought when I had the chest pain. I'm not a diabetic. I'm not a hypertensive. I have a good health body weight. I exercise every single day. So why me? Remember, so if you have diabetes, if you have pre-diabetes, if you're going to be that person tomorrow, you need to think about how can I prevent the risk of heart attack? So diabetes sweet, but not so sweet. Let me just, how do I move this? Okay, all right. So what is diabetes? I'm going to keep it very, very simple and short so you understand. So basically, a simple principle of diabetes is imbalance between insulin and glucose. So our body, when we eat something, our glucose increases because we're eating sugar and carbohydrates. So what our body does, it makes insulin from the pancreas, which then lowers the glucose in the blood. And when that balance is disturbed, either by our body not able to make insulin, or our body is making insulin, but we are not using it properly, that's become a problem, and your glucose levels stay high in the blood, which is damaging to your system. And that's diabetes, very simple. So there are really two types of diabetes. Type 1, which is less common, only 5 to 10% of people have that. And that may be you have antibodies. This is genetic, you cannot change it. So your body has antibodies and it kills the insulin production from the pancreas. So your body is not making insulin, and that's type 1. But it's only 5 to 10%, and these people will need insulin for lifetime. But the common variety is type 2, which means our body is able to make insulin, but we are not able to use it properly. And there's a full cycle of why we are not able to use insulin properly. And the biggest culprit of the cycle is obesity or weight gain. So the more weight we gain, the more insulin has to be produced because our body develops insulin resistance and is not able to use the insulin. So when you're not using the insulin, the glucose goes up and that becomes diabetes. But it perpetuates because the more insulin resistance, the more we eat, because insulin is a growth hormone which increases appetite. So the more we eat, the more weight we gain, the more insulin we produce, the more insulin resistant we become, and the cycle goes on. And this is 90 to 95% of the population, and that is why it is called the lifestyle disease. So how do you diagnose it? Do I have diabetes? Very simple. If you do a blood sugar test after fasting for 8 hours, very, very simple. You go to the doctor's office, you go to any lab after fasting for 8 hours, which means after dinner, you don't eat anything. And if your glucose is above 125, you have diabetes. The normal blood sugar is less than 100. So if you are between 100 to 125, you have pre-diabetes. But if you're above 125 or 126 and above, you have diabetes. So let's say if you don't want to fast, you can also get another test by your doctor, which is called the hemoglobin A1C. And this is a 3-month sample for preventing or talking about diabetes, diagnosing diabetes. You called A1C. If it's above 6.5, you have diabetes. The normal A1C is less than 5.7. Again, you don't need to remember these numbers because your doctors and the healthcare worker would know these numbers. But again, the more informed consumer you are, the better you are. So if your A1C is less than 5.7, you're normal. If the A1C is more than 5.7 and less than 6.5, you're pre-diabetic. And let me talk a little bit about that more. So if you look at the diabetes world, almost 38 million Americans, or 11.6% of the population, has diabetes, which is more than 1 out of 10, or close to 1 out of 10. But if you think about pre-diabetes, 97 million, which is 1/3 of the country. 1/3 of the country has pre-diabetes nowadays, okay? Age 18 and older. Diabetes is the 8th leading cause of death in the United States, and it remains still #1 cause for heart attack. And more than that, when you're diabetic and you have a heart attack, you don't feel it because you don't get chest pain. So I was lucky. I was able to feel chest pain and was able to get attention and did something about myself. But if you don't even feel it, you can be drop dead. So that's the worst enemy for you if you have long-standing diabetes. And why? The community of color, any community, you take Hispanics, you take African Americans, you take Asian Indians, we have more risk of diabetes because the general obesity is higher. So if you look at the risk factor, I say obesity, 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 obesity. That's the #1 risk factor for diabetes. Family history, sedentary lifestyle. If you have a desk job and you don't exercise every day, you are bound to become diabetic. Abnormal cholesterol is a risk factor for diabetes. That just tells you you have dysmetabolic syndrome, which means you have some form of insulin resistance, and eventually you'll become a diabetic. Smoking, independent risk factor for becoming diabetes. Family history I talked about. And another big thing, gestational diabetes in women. And one of the things, I was at a cardiac seminar yesterday and listening, and what they talked about in women, if a woman gets gestational diabetes, they have triple the risk of dying from heart disease above age 50. So a very early thing which happens when we are 30 years old has a higher risk of developing heart disease in women. And not only that, if you have gestational diabetes, you have an offspring which has a higher risk of developing diabetes when they're born. So we are not only doing to our generation, we are actually bringing another generation in life which is not going to be good. So very important for women. Symptoms are none. 90% of the time you have no symptom. You just go to a doctor and you have diabetes. But if you have symptoms, I really say by the time you have symptoms, it's too late already. It's too late. If you're feeling very thirsty, you're urinating often, you're feeling very hungry, you're extremely tired, you have cut or bruises that don't heal, you have unexplained weight loss. That's typical type 1 diabetes. Tingling, numbness, pain in hand. This is all too late. And diabetes is coming. November is the diabetes month. So we need to make sure that if we have any symptom, we definitely go see a doctor and get our blood sugar checked. But if you have no symptom, I would argue everyone should get tested. So this is what the ADA recommendations were. Who should be tested? So what they talk about, if you are overweight or obese, which means your BMI, and BMI is a little tool which I'll talk to you in a second, BMI more than 25 in regular population, BMI more than 23 in South Asian, you are obese or overweight. And if you have first degree relative, if you have history of heart disease, high blood pressure, low cholesterol, HDL, good cholesterol is low, high triglycerides, and if you are physically inactive, tell me how many people are physically inactive. So everybody should be tested for diabetes, in my opinion. People with pre-diabetes definitely should be tested yearly because the conversion rate depends upon how much weight you keep gaining. And if your A1C is above 6, you have an 11% risk of becoming diabetic in the next 5 years. So the higher the A1C in the pre-diabetes realm, the more chances of diabetes. And like I told you, women with diabetes during pregnancy need to be tested every 1 to 3 years for their lifetime to become, so because they have a higher risk of becoming diabetes. Gestational diabetes have a 40% risk of diabetes in the next 5 years. Very high. And then for all other people, they say that testing should begin at age 35. I really don't believe in it because there's so many more obese people now. So if you see the obesity as a risk factor, you're going to get tested anyway. And there are 2 self-testing tools you can do. There's a 60-second risk test for type 2 diabetes. If you go to American Diabetes website, they tell you you can take a quick risk in 1 minute and you know what your risk is. And then you can go get it checked out. It also has a tool for calculating your BMI. BMI can be easily calculated by just, if you put in the internet, put BMI, and you get a calculator, takes 10 seconds to calculate your BMI. So simple things you can do today after leaving this place to find out whether you're diabetic or not. Sorry, I think I did. Okay, so this last slide is probably the most important. As Nirmal talked about 80-20 principle, okay? 80% of the diabetes is preventable, and you can do it today. Simple mantra, live healthy lifestyle. Healthy lifestyle, diet and exercise again. And I have given you a healthy eating plate on the right side. So you can see that this is how your plate should look like when you're eating every single day. 1/2 should be just greens and vegetables and salads. 1/4 should be grains, which is your grains, which is your carbs or complex carbs, and 1/4 should be protein, which is your chicken, tofu, whatever you can. So if you make this your regular day-to-day principle, and you do that every day, you're okay to have a party on Saturday. You're okay to have a fun time on Sunday. But if you do this every day, if you're eating only meat and potatoes, that's Pennsylvania Dutch diet. 1 meat and 1 potato, and that's it. If you have no greens and grains, you're not going to have a healthy diet. So 80% of the time, you need to follow healthy diet. 20% of the time, you can cheat. Okay? And if people are not packing their lunch, that's only one thing which saved both me and my husband for 25 years. We packed our lunch every single day of the week, 5 days a week. And that saved us from everything. Have time for reducing stress. I think if one thing, the Brown Heart documentary, we spent a good 20 minutes on meditation. Everybody has stressful lives. I'm not telling you to quit your job because that's your life. You have to work. You have to feed your family. But if you're stressed out, spend 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening on meditation. Just quiet time for yourself. That's important. And I think what I realized when I had the heart disease, the only one thing which was missing from my life is meditation. And I am a type A personality, wants to do everything for everyone. And if there were 25 hours in a day, I would be working 25 hours. That's how the person I was. And I think that's when I added meditation to my routine. And both of us now regularly do meditation. Morning, definitely for sure. Evening, if I'm stressed out, I do an evening meditation. Exercise daily for 30 minutes to increase your heart rate at least 5 times a week. If you cannot do 5 times, start with 2 times a week. I don't care. If you're sitting on your desk, walk around at lunchtime. If nothing, just stand up and sit down on your desk. Put something, there's a now exercise bikes you can put under your feet and just keep doing that. So there's a lot of stuff you can do. And get yourself tested. Again, under emphasis. Keep yourself, know your body, check your chest, find out you're diabetic. And then if you are pre-diabetic, the only reason I say that if you're pre-diabetic, you can save heart attack because the clock for heart disease starts to tick when you're pre-diabetic and not when you're diabetic. So by the time you become diabetic, the horse is out of the barn. So thank you very much.
Well, both of you make it very easy to understand this. I mean, very easy, very simple, right? Diet, exercise. And now she's added the other dimension, which I was going to ask about. What about the emotions? What about, right? And that's why I thought we were going to bring in Ruth Moore, because mental health and all of this, and I actually, spiritual health, I say, all of it, that gets to the meditation, all of that matters, right? So Ruth, come on and tell us about mental health.
Green button, okay. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. All right, so let's talk a little bit about mental health. We have, for the last 12 years, been conducting community health needs assessment. So what we do is we go into our community and we need to find out what is it that the community that we serve needs. And what we found is that for the last 12 years, mental illness has been one of the highest needs of the highest. So I'm sorry, I've just lost my trail of thought. Yes, so mental illness was the highest. People suffering from mental illness, people feeling trapped, isolated, etc. But what this chart shows here is that if we're going to give services for mental illness, we also need to be thinking about their nutrition and their healthy lifestyle. So same as what the other panelists were talking about. So we can't just have somebody come in for service. We either give them therapy or we give them medication if that's what they need. We really need to talk about their lifestyle, because that is what's going to help them. We cannot say, go and get these medications, but we're not finding out about if they have food. So what we've done is, most of the departments in Penn State, we have food banks. So we have these food banks so that if we find out that a patient does not have enough food for themselves or their family, then we have food for them. And then we talk to them about exercise, but that's something they have to do by themselves. But again, what's scary is that it's changed. I think I can talk it. So what's scary is the fact that you can see in red that mental illness came up second, but it's still a #1 priority, because the other chart, there it is, the other chart shows you that mental illness is the highest concern for people. And what you find here is that the health concerns for the community members, these are people that we polled in food banks, we sent out surveys online, we spoke to people, we spoke to our patients, and this is what they tell us, that this is what their fear is. And then the key informant survey, they also made this #1, and these are leaders in the community who provide any service. So what we had to do is we needed to look at how we were going to serve these individuals in the community. What we also found is you can't just go out and employ psychiatrists. The rate of psychiatrists working that is going down each time. There is not enough psychiatrists for patients. So I talk to people about going and getting help if they have concerns about maybe developing a mental illness or they're in the throes of mental illness. But then we can't provide them with psychiatrists and sometimes even therapists, and even they get burnt out. So there's not enough individuals to serve people with mental illness, and that becomes scary. So what we've had to do is we have to make sure that we educate, we do some prevention tactics, we provide resources, we collaborate with other organizations, because this is not competition. This is not keeping patients for ourselves and not telling other individuals about that they can go elsewhere. So we find that we will collaborate with WellSpan. When Holy Spirit was independent, we collaborated with Holy Spirit, because there is enough people to go around and they need the services. So one of the other things that we did is that we provide We provide platforms so that people can talk about their mental illness, and they can also, we gave free support groups, because we needed to find a way to help individuals if we couldn't get them in for service. And what we do is as well is that we come together as a task force with other organizations, other hospitals, and we want to promote what they're doing, because if we can't take a patient, we know that they can go elsewhere. We promote newcomers into the mental health world, and what we do is we promote them. We let the community know that there are these services. They may not get a psychiatrist, but they can at least start with a therapist or some form of counseling. We have to do as much as we can. The major thing is to collaborate. We cannot just say to a patient, we have no services. We cannot serve you because we have no space. We need to find them other places to go, and we need to give them tools in order to find these other organizations. So mine is pretty short. Some of the feedback that we got back from our surveying, because this is something that we do every 3 years, is that people are suffering from social isolation, loneliness, and support, getting support. And we found this out during COVID, because people and children, adults and children, they stayed at home. So what happened was, when we were in the throes of COVID, people were not coming for services. People would not go to the emergency room and then come in for psychiatric services. So nowadays, and I tell my cadets, the police cadets, this all the time, you are going to have a harder time with individuals in the community who have a mental illness than your predecessors did. It's a whole lot worse. There is more people that need mental services or mental well-being counseling. There's more than there ever was, and we do not have the capacity to take them. So we need to also let people know that mental illness is not a shame. It is actually an illness. It's no different an illness to cancer, to heart concerns, to any other medical condition. It is an illness. Now, I know that sometimes people, you may lose your job, you may lose a spouse, and you may become depressed, you may develop a mental illness, but it's not there for good if you get treatment. But there are people who have this medical condition and they need to be served. Aging populations, more and more people are being diagnosed with mental illness. So if you were in your 60s or 70s, and think about losing your spouse, think about losing your friends that you've had for 50 years, okay? You can get depressed. So before, doctors would say, oh, that's okay, they're getting older. But it isn't that. Now we have geriatric clinics, and I'm sure other hospitals do as well. Now they're being diagnosed with a mental illness. So that increases the need for services. We've just recently hired a psychiatrist after, I think it's about 3 years, who is serving just the geriatric population because there is such a need. We also encourage them, just like we talked about the exercising, to go and have group activities. Go into somewhere where there's a social aspect to your day, because if you stay in isolation, it gets worse. And then we want to continuously look at best practices and just work on them and make them better and so on. We just need to keep on going. So I would advise, the same as you going for screening, is that if you feel that you have a mental illness, if you feel that you should be getting services because you're feeling down more times than you're not, then you need to seek services. You need to find out where you can get these services, and you can just Google it, but the point is that you need to get services. You need to even just look after your mental well-being. That's just as important as looking after anything else that is medical. Your body, you need to look after your mind as well. It's very important. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we've had quite an overview, and I also want to bring in Jim and Phyllis into the conversation. But before I do just want to throw at our panelists one key question. We heard such good news about the advances and how, cancer treatment is just skyrocketing ahead. So I want to ask that of each of you in your fields. Is the treatment, is what's available skyrocketing ahead, that you can deal with heart disease better now than you could 20 years ago or whatever? But also to ask Dr. Ashok, can we afford it? I mean, it's there, is it accessible to everybody, or is it something out there that only people who are very well off can handle? So we'll start with you and then we'll work our way down.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, to be honest with you. When we speak to patients, there is toxicity of treatment. At the same time, the biggest thing is financial toxicity. So, it's a cancer is not cancer of a person. Cancer is a cancer of family. If you how much you're going to affect with the finances and everything, right? So, at this point, at least on a daily basis, for what we see, if a treatment is FDA approved, most of the insurances will cover that. So that's step number one. Let's say if it's a clinical trial, a lot of the times, the treatment is covered through clinical trial. That's number two. So let's say if a treatment is, if we are tweaking some treatments for some patients for the better benefit, let's say if there is some discussion with insurance, obviously there is always, we can do peer-to-peer evaluations where most of the times things are successful. And rarely, when we really want to reach out, the pharma, first of all, we have some grants, a bunch of grants. There's for people with leukemia, there is leukemia lymphoma grant. People who are kids for under 18 years, there is Ronald McDonald's trust, 4 Diamonds, where it's entire leukemia cancer treatment is free for them, from 4 Diamonds, if they're under 18 years. And let's say if there are some people who cannot afford, and for some reason, insurance wants you to try something which you cannot, if you're not successful, then obviously you can reach out to pharma companies where they provide free drugs. So so there are multiple tiers where we can make it successful for the patient to get it. Obviously, is it 100% successful? May not be, but a lot of times we are successful in getting the best available treatment for the patient. So, patient is already suffering with the disease. We don't want them to be suffering with something else. So let's be on that us. Yeah.
Good. So there are multiple ways they can get access to it. Okay. Dr. Joshi, is it?
Thank you for the question, Joyce. I think that in the realm of cardiology, and particularly in the realm of treatment of what is called ischemic heart disease, which is what causes heart attacks and such, the treatment is fairly standard anymore, very, very standard, and it has been pretty much has become so good. And I'll tell you, I'm delighted to report that this is true perhaps across the world, that stenting procedures, open heart surgical procedures, even in countries with limited resources, they have mastered the art of and science of doing it. So thank God for that. So I don't think treatment, as far as it's the awareness of getting quick treatment and timely treatment, and appropriate awareness that something needs to be done quick. When you get what you think might be a little acidity, or what looks like, hey, could this be something? Let me see what happens overnight. The hard part is convincing people to act on it quick and really, really early. But to me, the cost of treatment, yes, it's not exactly inexpensive, but for the most part, treatment is accessible and relatively uniformly available. I think the difficult part with cardiac illness has been prevention, has been to convince people that the problem is really beginning to start in childhood. Like Renu said, even a generation earlier. And by the time you have a child that is predisposed and is obese, and childhood obesity is a huge problem today, that's when the seeds are being sowed. And if you begin to act then with the right education and the right way to do things, appropriate childhood diets, appropriate prevention, appropriate exercise regimens, and so on, is that you would be preventing heart disease. So I think that's where the challenge is with heart disease. It's not, unlike cancer, which is a huge problem on the other end.
Yeah.
You know, affordability of new things, therapies are very expensive and so on, like you rightly pointed out. So two different animals in some ways, right? Both problems, but in very different ways.
Yeah. You know, I just hold there for one second, because this obesity thing is important, but it's not as easily tackled as you would think, right? Especially even childhood obesity. The reason why I say that is because there's a stigma. You don't want to call someone obese, right? You don't want to say right? So how do you suggest, I mean, maybe that's the mental health thing, how do you suggest people deal with that, right?
Yeah, I think we are, and I think we've really, and you see this in public discourse today, we've moved from one end of the spectrum where even discussing it was like, oh my God, is it politically correct?
Yeah.
To now, publicly someone saying, you are fat. You know what I'm saying? So I think the pendulum has moved from here to, it's being suddenly moved to here. And the answer is in between. The answer is you have an appropriate conversation, and when you do, and we as physicians have learned to do that most of our lives at the bedside, right? To be able to say, to be able to talk to people with respect and dignity, and yet be able to make the point across to say, hey, there is an issue here, and you need to address this issue. And I always find, and I think Renu does this better than anyone, which is that I find that if there is trust, meaning you've developed that trust over a period of time, patients and their families, in our case, and I think the community in general as well, if there is trust, they will take almost any information from you that is well-intentioned and at least make an honest attempt. They may fail or not do well with it, but that's human. But if we are able to have a trust, people do respond.
And I think I'm going to take it a little further, because childhood obesity is both in school and at home.
Yes.
So what we need to do is curb both places. Like in California, the governor 10 years ago passed the rule there would be no juice and sodas in the school. Only California could do that. And I don't know how successful they were, but that was the only state where we had that. So if you don't have sodas and juices in school, the kids are going to drink water. And we are now sort of reverting back with what's going on nowadays, and I won't get into that. But home, where your kids are eating the dinner and the breakfast, start from home. The charity, we say, start from home. So if the mother is cooking well, and if the parents are eating healthy, the kids are going to eat healthy. If the parents are going to eat 5 days a week outside food, what are the kids going to learn? So I think it has to be curbed at both ends, in my opinion. And I think it has to be done much more in an institutional way. The childhood obesity otherwise will not stop. But we do see a curve in generalized obesity. At least the curve has been flat for the last year, and it's not going up. So that's a good sign.
Is that because people are more educated about it?
Probably,
Okay.
because obesity was like this, and now it's turning flatter. So I
Interesting.
think it's much better to see that curve, which is important. Now, as far as the cost of diabetes medications are concerned, and even heart disease medications are very cheap. So people can take medicines and survive. Yes, the procedures are difficult and more expensive, the stenting and the open heart bypass. But people like me who are being managed on meds, because I didn't get a stent, I didn't get an open heart, the medicines are very cheap. Same thing for diabetes. Now, there are new medications which are excellent for diabetes and obesity, and you can see 30, 40, 50-pound weight loss in 4 or 5 months. Excellent medications, but they are very expensive. They remain very expensive. Most of the people cannot afford it. Insurance company this year have started to not cover them, because they will go bankrupt if they start covering those medications. And what I do feel, again, and I think it's country-wise, because some of the same drugs are much cheaper in the other countries.
Yes.
So again, how do I tackle that? It's not in my realm. But diabetes can still be managed by the cheaper medications, which we do in foundation. Our people can't afford the newer medication, but we have them on 3 old medication and insulin, and we can still control their diabetes very well. So all it is a matter of trying.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to that, to what Renu just said. In the foundation, I have a little thing hanging on the wall that is the $4 list from Walmart. 90% of my life is around that $4 list. And the majority of people do just fine with the $4 list, $4 for 1 month and $9 for 3 months. Okay. They do just fine.
If you have caring physicians that really know how to guide and instruct you, the problem is so many of our, I'm not saying the physicians aren't caring, but you have to have patients who really understand how to communicate and how to engage. So let's talk about the medications, Ruth, for mental health. Has there, and how you treat. The one thing that concerns me that you also said was that there aren't enough medical psychologists and psychiatrists.
That's right.
And I did want to ask you too, is that particularly just for our area, or is that nation or worldwide?
It is nationwide. And in fact, in Pennsylvania, we're doing better than a lot of the other states on the west side. You get individuals who have a mental illness and cannot get services. They actually go to the west. They go to places that are hot because they're homeless. So if you have a mental illness and you haven't got insurance and you lose your job, et cetera, then you may become homeless. But going back to the medications, yes, some of the medications are expensive. I remember I've actually been with Penn State PPI for 17 years. And
17 years.
I remember when we first opened the hospital, we had great psychiatrists, young psychiatrists, and they wanted to do the best for the patients that they could do. So they gave them great medication while they were in the hospital. But what they weren't thinking about is that the patient has to be discharged. Can they afford the medication? The medication is not in every pharmacy. Is there a pharmacy close to where they are? A good majority of the patients don't drive. So can they get there? That was the issue that we had with medication. But our biggest issue is access. As I said, there's not enough psychiatrists. There's not enough therapists. Through COVID, we had not so much the psychiatrists, but the therapists actually walked out. They just walked out because they were also going through trauma. So we lost a lot of staff because of the situation, the COVID era, etc. So they were burnt out too. They need help too. So it's trying to, we work constantly on getting people access. And that's why I say we collaborate. So if we cannot do it, we know a man who can.
Just one thing I might add is, I think that from what I understand, the psychologist services are still not covered by insurance. Most of them, right?
Right, yeah, you're absolutely
and
right.
Psychology is such a big therapist, is such a big help to people who don't want to take medication. And each time I've had several examples that you have to pay $80, $90 for just one psychologist sitting. And if you need 20 of them, you can't afford them.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to you because I am also still concerned about, looks like we're moving to deny health insurance to a lot of people. Where is that going to lead? So hold on to that. I'm going to bring two other people into the conversation. So Phyllis, do you want to come up and the same questions for both of you. And Jim, please, both of you come up. I want to ask, I don't know if you want to stand here or just use your microphone because we can talk. But the same questions that we've been addressing here, have there been advances in kidney disease that we need to know about? Is it getting better and easier to treat or more easily diagnosed?
Well, it's interesting. This is a great panel. Thank you so much to Highmark and the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg to have this discussion, because in kidney health, diabetes and hypertension are side by side. And it goes with heart disease. So when we talk about the brown heart, I'm really excited about that because we've had a lot of energy around talking to our patients about how important it is to take care of their heart because it affects their kidneys. Some great specialists that are cardiovascular renal specialists who we're also working with. So we're at an interesting time in history. We have some changes that are really going to affect people long term. And we're hearing from people every day. What we've said about a lot of the mental health issues that come with chronic diseases in general, chronic kidney disease in particular, whether you are stage 3 and you just found out and you're thinking, oh, am I going to be on dialysis? I'll just die first. people who are on dialysis looking for a kidney, people who got a kidney, maybe look back on dialysis waiting for a transplant. It's a spectrum. But what I will say is one of the things that really concerns me is that we're now moving toward less access and increased need. People now are going to have to be going back to the emergency room for primary care. We were moving ahead. We were moving ahead of that. We're starting to get a little bit ahead of that, and I see us kind of moving backwards, which is a huge concern to me. We had two major insurers who just decided, and one of them backed off of it, Cigna and Aetna, who decided that if you sent in E&M codes that were the upper level, like 99205, I love coding, they were automatically going to be denied. No review, just denied. One of those, Cigna, backed off of that after a real outcry. So you have a patient now who comes to see you. They're a new patient, so you've got to spend time with them, finding out what's going on. And you already now know they have an insurer that is probably going to deny that high level code just because that's the one you use, but it described the care you gave. These arbitrary and capricious decisions are affecting people. So we have to continue to speak out. We have to continue to remind people. Open enrollment is now. If you have an insurer that you're not happy with, now is the time we need to be saying to people, we're talking to our patients about it, let's look at the insurance that you have, let's look at what's available. This rollback in the Affordable Care Act, we're going to see a lot of people with a lot of need and less access. And it is really concerning. A lot of our patients that are on dialysis are Medicare eligible. Some of them are dual eligible in Medicare and Medicaid. And we get calls every day in my office, every day. Am I going to lose my insurance? I guess I'll just go home and die. I mean, these are the voices that I hear, the faces that I see. So I love these kind of forums where we can have this conversation. I love the advances in cancer care. I'm really concerned about research dollars being cut, because how do we regain some of those advances that we've had? How do we maintain what we have to make certain it's available when hopefully the pendulum starts to swing more toward the middle?
Yeah.
I just want to encourage all of us to just continue to be healthy ourselves so we can take care of the people who need courage and encouragement. I want to invite all of us to have conversations with people, and if they're concerned about their health insurance, help them find the options. I know I'm so happy that our friends at Highmark have had this, because I have been sending people to the Highmark store. I've been sending them to wherever they need to go, and talking to lobbyists saying, you know, these people who vote for you, who live in your district, have these needs. And it's going to affect your bottom line if you're not taking care of the people who are trying to get to the polls. Yeah. So we won't make this political, but we will say that all politics are local, and eventually it trickles down to real people who are living with diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, cancer, prostate cancer, who are on dialysis or looking for a transplant, who are trying to live their best lives. So I would just encourage us to take care of ourselves, take care of each other, make certain we have insurance that will cover what we need if we have insurance. I had a patient I had to say, go to the emergency room. She didn't want to go. She didn't have insurance. Her blood sugar was 459. And one of the people that she called said, oh, that's not going to kill you.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, go to the emergency room. We'll figure out everything later, because this is bad information. You got bad advice.
Well,
so let's give good advice.
Points. Yeah, exactly. Jim, tell us about prostate cancer. Is that advanced? Is there good news about that?
Well, the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to applaud the panel and their presentation this evening. I'm a 34-year prostate cancer survivor. I was diagnosed at age 55. I'm be 90 next year. I went to
Jim, wow, you look fantastic.
My wife saved my life by making me go to the doctors. A young internist incorporated this new test called PSA in 1991. I was referred to a urologist because the number was high. He sent me to Rochester, Minnesota, the Mayo Clinic, and we were living in Chicago. He because Mayo Clinic was concentrating on radical prostatectomy, and I'm retired military that paid for all that care. I thought that was the standard of care in America, and I found out I was the exception then and in the exception now. And I got involved in advocacy because we're trying to make a change in that journey. There's two elephants that we haven't talked about that I need to talk about. One is we have a reactive healthcare system in America. And what the person sees on TV every day is ask your doctor about X, Y, and Z, which means something has happened, and now going to the doctor, getting medication is going to happen. The system is driven by fee-for-service, diagnosis and treatment. I sit on hospital boards and a lot of medical facilities, and our success is not based on how well our patients are. It's how many new beds we create, how many practices we buy. So that's what's driving it. We don't have a universal healthcare system. My second tour in Vietnam, I was an advisor to the South Vietnamese forces, South Saigon, and one day my counterpart told me that he fired his doctor. And I asked him why. He said, because he got sick. And I didn't understand that, but there's some thought in Eastern medicine, you go to the doctor to stay well, yin-yang principle. Can you imagine that in the USA? I talk to men all the time, and what they don't understand, and most people don't understand, that the best time to treat these diseases is in the early stages, and the early stages is before there's any symptoms. So therefore, you should go to the doctor when you're well, not when you're sick. And we don't preach that, going to the doctor when you're well. So knowing yourself, knowing your numbers, and the things that we're presenting here are so important, but we have to give more incentives to those who work in health to keep people well, not treat
Not
them
just
when they're
treat
sick.
when they're ill. But you know, what I have heard loud and clear from you, from Phyllis, but you know, that it's also your personal empowerment. There are things you not just wait to see the doctor, but what am I doing every day to see how am I eating? What am I getting up and exercise, right? Do I know my numbers? It starts with the individual.
Well,
right?
I talked about one elephant in the room. The second elephant in the room with me is I'm dealing with men. My best audience for men's health are women, not men. Men understand preventive maintenance. I ask them, why did you take the car in to get the oil change? Was the car sick? Well, they understand the importance of maintenance and how it extends the longevity of the vehicle and cuts down the cost. It's the same in medicine. But we haven't really sold the public on that idea. We spend tons of money on healthcare, and when we look at other industrial nations, especially those with universal healthcare, they spend a lot less on healthcare than we do, and their people live a lot longer than we do. So we all know that when we treat diseases in the early stages, it's a lot more cost effective than in the later stages. But that's a hard sell, and I'm not pointing fingers at the health professionals, but we as citizens must be more advocates for our own care. And until we turn that elephant around, we're going to continue to have major health problems.
Yeah. Well, we're really privileged and thankful to have advocates like you, both of you who are there, and of course these great medical professionals who are actively every day trying to get people to understand what they have to do, preventive as well as treatment if something happens. Yes.
But the other thing that we really have to acknowledge and speak clearly about is that we have been turning a corner on this. We have been saying you're going to be paid for preventative medicine. We're going to be paid for screening. Go to the doctor and have this done. And now we're backtracking and saying we're not going to cover. These are no longer covered services. So we're going to see more people who, when the physician sees them, they're sicker because they waited longer, because they were uninsured. The person who didn't go to the ED, she didn't go because she was embarrassed. She didn't want people to know she didn't have health care. And I said, well, your family won't be embarrassed. They'll be mourning you when you're dead. So go to the ED. But I think that we've really got to step up and say we need to cover prevention, we need to cover screening, we need to have education, which is a huge part of it. But if we don't have access to health care because we don't have insurance, we're going to start to see a return to some of these we're going to start going backwards.
Yeah,
that
and I'm going to
concerns
ask the panelists to close us out to talking about, what do they see? Or they have any concerns in this period? And we, unfortunately, we have to talk about government too, because government is how we're getting, our health care. But before we do, any pressing questions from anyone here that we didn't get to address? So you wanted to, yes, go ahead, Russell. We just met tonight, Russell Goodman.
Question for Dr. Renu Joshi. Do statins, which seems to be utilized by everybody in the country, do they cause diabetes?
So that's an excellent question. Statins in low dose, when they prevent heart disease, do not cause diabetes. There is risk of diabetes, which increases with statin as you go up on the dose. So a person like me who did not take statin, and I think that's something I talk about in the documentary, had I taken statin 10 years ago when my LDL was only 120, I could have prevented this. But it was normal. I thought it was normal, but it's not normal. So when you take statins in high dose at 40 and 80 milligram, yes, there is clearly a statistical increase in diabetes, or a pre-diabetic may become diabetic, or a new person may become pre-diabetic, but the risk of that diabetes is much smaller in comparison to the help the statins provide to prevent a heart attack. So even if there is a slightly increased risk of diabetes, it's easily treatable and very early stages. We do not, the American Heart Association and American Diabetes Association does not tell us to stop the statin, but rather tackle the diabetes.
Just to follow up though, if you already have diabetes and you begin a statin regimen, does it worsen the situation?
Minimally on a very high dose. So if you're taking 80 milligrams of Lipitor or 40 milligram of Crestor in a very high dose, yes, there is a slight increase, like your A1C may go up from 7 to 7.3 or 7.4. So it's not like it's going to change from 7 to 12. So it's very small risk, but definite risk.
I think Suhail, you have, yeah. Get the microphone. Oh, yes, okay. So we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I think the vast majority of diabetics end up on statins. Because very few diabetics have bad cholesterol, LDL less than 70. The vast majority of them end up on statins.
It has to be. Everybody has to be on statin because the LDL has to be kept less than 70 if you're a diabetic.
Okay. Any other burning questions? If not, okay, go ahead, burn.
Good evening, Dr. Ashok. I'd like to ask you about the side effects of immunotherapy, because nowadays a lot of cancer patients end up on immunotherapy, and it seems to be like the holy grail and the cutting edge of cancer management. What major side effects can we be concerned about?
As I told you before, immunotherapy is pretty much activating your own body's immune system to attack the cancer cells. So when it's activated, sometimes this activation not just kill the cancer cells, so it can technically irritate any part of your body. So we call this classic symptom called itis, I-T-I-S, that means inflammation. So it can irritate from any part of your head to toe, it can cause encephalitis of the brain. It can cause something called pneumonitis if it happens in lungs. If it irritates your gut, you can have colitis. If it irritates your liver, you get hepatitis. If it irritates your skin, dermatitis. If it irritates your joints, you get arthritis. So the thing here is, in cancer side effects, we have called grade 1, 2, 3, 4. Grade 1 is manageable side effects. Grade 2 is manageable with some medications. Grade 3 or 4 is severe side effects. When you say the side effects, most of them are grade 1 and 2. And very, very rarely, less than 5 to 10% have grade 3 or 4 side effects. And those are we have well-driven protocols on how to manage these side effects. So there are certain people who has autoimmune conditions where we cannot, let's say if someone is having uncontrolled rheumatoid arthritis or myasthenia gravis, something like that, those people we won't recommend immunotherapy because that's going to flare up their disease like really bad. But like someone has a well-controlled rheumatoid arthritis and medications, then we give some steroids, like 10 milligrams of low-dose steroids along with immunotherapy so that the benefit is more than the risk there. So like you always have to have risk and benefit conversation with the patient, looking at all their characteristics and everything. Yeah.
So we have heard from Phyllis and for Jim that, what their concerns are going forward right now. I mean, we're hearing all these wonderful things and how you can prevent and how you can, but in reality, we're facing more than just what the medical profession can do, but what government is going to do, especially with regard to healthcare. So that or anything, as you're looking out over the next year before we get together again to see where we stand, what do you see? Do you see the medical care profession facing some real challenges, maybe unprecedented challenges, or do you think we will simply cruise through this period where we may not have the ACA anymore? So,
can I answer from a
Yes,
mental health
yes.
perspective? We are seeing that I don't think if I came back here next year I'd have better news for you, because so some of the populations, for example, LGBTQ, some young people who want to go through gender changes, all of that research is either stopped because of funding, they've either been reduced, etc., or a company has, or a hospital has just decided that they're not going to do it anymore because of all the changes in politics. So we don't expect to see a bright light because we know that it's going to increase.
Yeah, I think that really what many of us are seeing coming down the pike in the course of the next year, 2 years, 3 years, does appear pretty bleak, quite honestly. In fact, I believe we've been, when I say we, meaning as communities, we've been talking about healthcare being a crisis starting several years ago. The cost of drugs is skyrocketing. The cost of care is skyrocketing. There are amazing new procedures that are extraordinarily expensive. How you tackle all of that, and then in the middle of all of that, the current crisis with funding being completely decimated to institutions that we worshipped, institutions like the National Institutes of Health. I was there, Renu and I were there a couple of months ago on a graduation of an oncology fellow, and the place is a skeletal framework of itself. Most people, senior researchers, have left. It's a disaster zone right now. So I think that what we are going to see is a lot of worsening before things get better. I think until the time that our communities we all talk about healthcare being a priority, but when it comes election time, uniformly, when a politician centers around healthcare, they're doomed, right? So that's the discrepancy. We have to put our votes where our thoughts are. And that's not a right-left issue. It's an issue of make healthcare a priority. And once we begin to say that, right, I think that's when, and if we begin to elect people who are standing on the grounds of healthcare, because that's what will make or break communities, in my opinion. So I think that's where it is. I don't think any politician touches healthcare with a 10-foot pole right now.
Yeah.
Because of all the past experiences from presidential elections and so on. So I think that from a political standpoint, communities have to stand up for themselves. And I think that there is some good. I always think optimistically. I think things will get worse, and they'll get so bad when things begin to impact real lives, then something happens and things begin to get better at that point because it becomes a priority.
Do you want to share anything on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they all pretty much well said that. Obviously, my main topic today was cancer research, having more trials, like obviously, like at higher institutions, help more patients. Like, so trials are not to run the trials. Trials are to help the patients. So again, at the end of the day, your people are the ones who are benefiting from it. Again, as I said, I mean, they're more experienced, like they have more cultural outgo. At least from what I have seen, I hope for the best.
Yeah. Well, one final thing that I wanted simply, we're now cut off from international, it seems, with no WHO and all of that. I'm wondering, is that affecting anything as well?
But quite honestly, there are so many crises going on in healthcare. I've almost forgotten that we've been cut off from the WHO.
Okay.
I mean, literally, when you have top of mind crises, including research funding, I mean, we've had one of the biggest research pieces for the South Asian community was the masala study, which we interviewed. We have the masala study is going to be decimated. It's going to be gone. So that's just one example. That's a small example in the grand scheme of things. So I know we kind of wrote about this back, in Penn Live back at the time, and I've almost forgotten about it because there's so many other crises that have come up since.
Yeah. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for being here and sharing their expertise, and also thank Phyllis and Jim for being here to share their expertise. And good
Joyce,
luck.
I have to say one last thing. Ruth kind of touched on it, I'm sorry, but we have patients that'll be afraid to go to the doctor now. They'll be afraid to go to the doctor's office. They'll be afraid to go to the hospital. They'll be afraid to go to school. They're afraid to come out of their houses. So we have that now, that issue with that psychological thing, but also now they're not going because they're afraid that they're going to be met by people with masks on and sent someplace who knows where. So we really have got to take
So
a
there's
stand.
there's a lot at stake. So please, thank you again, and we hope to see you next year. Bye-bye.